Okay, so you made it to number 5 in the series of creating graded patterns and creating real life patterns in CLO3D. In our last video, we selected a size to start our grading journey, but we did not have any measurements for our pattern. So this video is going to walk you through the POM tools and how to create measurements for your pattern so that when you do grade your pattern, you have an actual visual for each size as far as the measurements for your final garment. So let's take a look. So one of the things you'll notice throughout the series is that there were no baselines on my pattern. So I'm going to show you a way that you can create your measurements and then create your baselines. This is another reason why I use the forms from Alvenon, because they are very good at helping to identify those body landmarks that we talked about previously. So right now I've got my pattern all measured up. I've got my darts aligned properly. I've got my notches, but I don't have any measurements. One of the things you want to do before you start measuring is figure out where your pattern measurements are going to matter, meaning what will be your body landmark as well as your measurement, your point of measure. So there are two things: point of measure and method of measure. So point of measure is basically where your measurement point lies on the 3D garment. Your method of measure is how you measure that point, meaning are you measuring it in a circumference? Are you measuring it at a certain point on the pattern distance from another point? Sometimes POMs depend on each other to actually make the measurements. So now we're back at our base pattern 6. As you can see, none of my patterns are named properly. I still have the generic pattern names, but right now I just ticked that on, if you saw that a little bit earlier, so I can see what my pattern names are named. So basically we're going to go through and we're going to go ahead and make some of these changes and toggle on in your 2D window some of the tools that you actually need. So I'm going to delete some of these points because I don't really need them for measuring. But I'm going to go ahead and start the measuring process with the POM tools in CLO. So in your 2D window, you have your line measurements, and then you have, if you scroll all the way down, there are POM measurements. So this this point right here, I don't really need it. I can go ahead and just convert that to a curve point. That's not going to change my measurement at all. And I can go ahead and delete all of the little points that I use for curves in between before I start measuring, because there are certain points that I don't want to measure with those actual points. So I digress, but here we go. We're going to work on getting this actual pattern measured so we can see all the measurement changes when we do grading. So let me take you there. Okay, so I've actually named all my pieces. As you can see, now I know which is the left sleeve, right sleeve, all of that. That's going to be useful in printing our patterns and finalizing our pattern pieces. So if you see on your 2D toolbar at the bottom, there are two ruler type things and icons, I should say, and those are your tools for measuring. So just as you know already, the one with the little arrow on top of it is to edit the measurement, and the one that is just the point to point tells you exactly what it does. It measures point to point. So we want to make sure we reduce some of the points. But as you can see from the top of my sleeve point to the bottom of my sleeve, now I've got a 22 and almost 1/2 of an inch sleeve. So that's going to be my sleeve length measurement from the shoulder. So that's my sleeve length. My sleeve width is measured at the underarm at the widest part, point to point, at the widest part of the sleeve, which is usually right underneath the bust line. So 1 inch down is usually how people measure the muscle or the bicep. You can use the term interchangeably, and I have a little bit of a problem letting go here, so I should have put a point because it's easier to catch these to the point because it's a point to point tool. As you can see for the sleeve width, I have a little bit of a point sticking out there, so I will have to delete that. But it is better if you know where your points of measure are to add an actual point. So what you would do in this process is get rid of all the points you don't need and create points that you do need for measurement's sake. But then you will also have to go back and convert those points back until non-grade points, because you don't want those points to be graded, but they will be measured because they will be fixed to the garment piece. Okay, so this is now my elbow. Some of these measurements I do know off the top, and some of them you will find in your everyday pattern book. If you're building a pattern from scratch, which I have a video about that as well, then you will already know how far down and how far over to measure things. It's basic flat pattern making on a grid system, and you will know how to measure all of these different points. So right now I don't have any points on there, but I'm going to show you a way you can do your baselines based on the pattern that you have here and based on your POMs. So that would be a little bit further back in this video. But we're going to go ahead and measure our pattern pieces, and we're going to come back and check out what we got. Okay, so I didn't speed that up too fast because I wanted you to see how many different points of measure that you can get just from one dress. So you've got everything to your front high hip, back high hip, full high hip. You've got your sweep, you've got your front waist. Now when you're measuring pieces that are separate, you can actually get a circumference measurement by just continually clicking point to point to point, and that's how we got the sweep measurement. The sweep is actually a circumference measurement where the front hip and the back hip are just the points in the pattern. So one thing you will notice is that the measurements did not really align. So now I'm taking time to go through and make sure that my POM actually mimics a circumference around the garment. And that will tell me that at that point of measure, that is where my garment should be balanced at. So my garment should be balanced at your hip, your shoulder, your sleeve length. All of those lines should match up that go around the entire body. So it's easier to do on the sleeve because it can be just a straight line. But when you get to your waist, hip, and other various measurement on the bust or around the garment, then you have to kind of make sure that they match up side seam to side seam so that you can get the full circumference at that point. So now we're going through and I'm measuring the armhole. Now here's where we talk about POM with different measurements. One measurement is the armhole circle, meaning the full armhole curve at the front and at the back. This is how I'm measuring that. Some garments require you follow this measurement, which is the measurement of the armhole drop. So that tells me the difference between the armhole drop and or actually the shoulder and where the armhole ends up at. So right now that's looking like about 9, where the front armhole is more like 9 3/8. And then I'll give the back armhole measurement, which is almost 10, right? So that's 9 7/8 or 10. So what I would do with that information, that kind of tells you where the curve shape is, because you would have to kind of get to that measurement as far as you know, how the curve shape is in the front and in the back. With the armhole drop, you leave that a little bit open to just the curve. Okay, so now let's talk about baselines. So now that I have all my POMs laid out, I have to find a way to mimic these lines and create them as baselines. So right now I'm going to go ahead to my 2D tool window and I'm going to turn off my baselines, but not just yet. And I've got my annotations that are not showing, but I can turn the baselines on and off with the tool in the 2D window, in the 2D window menu. So right now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create lines in place on the pattern, in place of my, in the same place as my POM line, because now I've balanced the POM line from front to back with the body circumference and all of that. So I can go ahead and mimic these lines, and then I can create them as baselines. So let me take you through that. I'm going to walk you through on a 4x 4x speed so that you can see every line that I just made for POM. I'm going to mimic that line and then I'm going to make some adjustments. So let's speed through this and then you can get to the next point. Okay, so I've taken back control of my garment and I've added my baselines and I've checked them with the body landmarks on the form. And now I've got the resemblance of a balanced pattern with baselines, with body landmark lines that if I lay this pattern down flat, I'll know exactly where everything is at or where it's supposed to land. If I decide to use this pattern for another garment, I can definitely use it to go ahead. So I can use it to go ahead and it will be balanced for the next garment that it's used for if it becomes a sloper or a block pattern. So here we're going to just adjust it one more time because I want that high hip line to match up a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and move that up a smidge, and then we're going to see how we can get that done. But this is it, people. This is basically how you are going to be able to start your grading with these points. You can grade without these points, but I did not want to because I want to keep track of the growth of the pattern, and I want to see that as the pattern grows that the landmarks are in the right place. So this is one of the key points in pattern making, is having those baselines to show you how your garment grows and how things change with the size range that you are creating. So whether you're just making one size or you're making 5 or 6 sizes, as what we're going to do, this is it. So now you've got your POM, you've got your baselines in the right place, and you are pretty much almost ready for creating your grading. So now let's get into that. Another key point that I will make as far as like moving things around is to make sure with your POMs that you are not having double points, because it will continue to measure that whole line. So if you don't have a point to stop your POM measuring tool, if you don't align it directly with the pattern edge, then it will kind of add extra length to the measurement, but that's not what you want. So you want to make sure you get it as accurate as possible and make sure that your points are aligned with your baseline. If you're using this technique and you have to move your POM line to match your baseline, or if you have to extend it out, just zoom in real close and make sure that all of your lines are matched up. With your armhole, I should have added a few more extra points, but we're going to leave it like that. It's close enough to get the measurement that we need, being that armhole has a lot of ease. So we're going to go ahead and this will be the end. Thank you.